couple pages. The first page is we're going to revisit the old good faith estimate so we can kind of talk about what it was and what it is now, because they are vastly different without a doubt. Okay, the old good faith estimate, I'm just going to show you the one that Hometrust had. The thing about the old good faith estimate is it was not a promulgated form. Okay, it could vary from lender to lender to lender, and if you saw that, I'm sure you did see different formats. Some were more confusing than others. But the Hometrust one, I want to just kind of go over briefly. Top left, we would give your name and the term and the rate. Excuse me, yeah, top left. Top right would be the sales price, down payment, loan amount, MIP, VA funding fee, or whatever. So it was pretty straightforward at your top. It was basically your name and the loan and sales price. On the left side was a long box here on the left, which is the closing cost. Back then it was pretty straightforward. You'd list the lender's closing costs usually first, then other ancillary costs like title, survey, things of that nature, attorney's fees, and those would total out at the bottom left. Your top right was the escrow account on your prepaid items, your insurance, your tax reserves, insurance, home association if we had them in there, and we would list those at your top right. The middle section on the right-hand side was an estimated payment form. We'd figure out the principal and interest, estimate the taxes, estimate the insurance, home association if it was due, maintenance if it was due, and we would estimate a monthly payment for them. And then finally in the bottom right was the summary, which would put it all together. What's your down payment? What's the closing costs? What's the escrow account? Total it, take away any earnest money, option fees, things of that nature. This is vastly different than what you're going to be seeing here in the future. The key thing that this provided is, number one, what every buyer wants to know is, what's my monthly payment going to be? How much do I need at closing? I mean, that when it comes down, they want to know the rate, they want to know the terms, but they want to know, what's my monthly payment? How much do I need at closing? That is the question you're going to get. Well, as we go to the new good faith estimate, it's changing. The other thing to note about the old good faith estimate is no matter what time of year I gave that estimate to you, it was accurate. Whether that was January, June, October, these numbers are going to stay relatively the same because the prorations stay the same. Even though we would collect more months of taxes in the escrow account, the seller would be paying more taxes because they had taxes due from January 1 to the day of closing. So that proration would still stick to about 3 to 4 months that would go into the escrow account for the buyer who had an escrow account. Okay? Again, these things are changing when you hit the new good faith estimate. So why do we have a new good faith estimate? This is just a close-up I should have hit. Here's the reason why. The new good faith estimate is coming around because we've had so many complaints, or lenders, the HUD has had so many complaints about lenders. Bait and switch techniques, items being omitted from the closing, from the HUD, from the good faith estimate. Things like, insurance not being shown, tax reserves not being shown, surveys not being shown. POC items, one of the techniques was to take the appraisal and credit report and show them already paid and not put them in the total, even though they hadn't been paid yet. And then just, basically showing one set of fees and things on the good faith estimate, delivering something totally different at closing and not being there or around to be accountable for it. So HUD stepped in and said it was, unacceptable. So they stepped in and said they're going to revise it. So HUD jumped in, attorneys and all, and here we go. Here's what they've come up with for us. Now, first off, they had good intentions. In fact, here's their little statement that they said. Their intent is to standardize how fees are disclosed on the good faith and the HUD 1, making it easier on the borrowers. That was their intent, because they're trying to standardize it. Since the good faith estimates wasn't promulgated, there was many different forms of it. So here's what they've asked you to do, or asked lenders to do. All lenders are required to disclose fees in the same manner. The features have been added to the good faith estimate, because you didn't have to have that on the old good faith. You didn't have to say if it was an arm or a balloon. All lender fees will be combined in one number. In the past, in that old good faith estimate you saw in your handout, it listed all the different fees. On the new good faith estimate, there'll be one number that combines them all in one number. So it's called an origination charge, not an origination fee. That just keeps the lender from being able to maneuver numbers around. And then a reconciliation, which Stuart Title will be talking about here shortly, of how the good faith is compared against the HUD 1 at closing. So here's what you told me, here's what you delivered, and there's some accountability now here in the future. So what do the changes mean for you? When you see them, you're going to see it's basically confusion. Your borrower is going to be more confused on these new forms than they would be on the old ones. They're not going to tell them the monthly payment. They're not going to tell them an accurate amount at closing. So let's go and look at the new good faith estimate. It's on your second page. There's a couple different variations, but your second page starts an example of a good faith estimate. vastly different from the old GFE. The old good faith estimate had numbers galore. Add them up, show payments, show everything. This has more verbiage than it actually does numbers. And as you read through the good faith estimate, and you'll notice there's 3 basic pages to the good faith. Okay, the first page is going to detail, who's involved, some important dates, the loan term, and then the total, that's the charges. We're supposed to estimate the entitled charge of all fees collected. The second page is going to talk about the details of those charges. And the third page is really just explanations and basically a chart for shopping. Okay, this whole thing is to encourage the borrower to shop lender to lender to lender to try to get the best deal they can. So that is part of the encouragement. So here's the top of the first page. The first page has the most stuff. The first thing it starts off with is the 4 important dates. Okay. Well, first it starts off with the parties involved. So, buyer's name, lender's name, things of that nature. But the 4 important dates is what we're going to start with. And that basically is date 1, line 1 is how long the lock is good for. So if somebody comes in for a quote today, the lock is going to be good for today. The quote is only good for 1 day because the market changes every day. So if someone comes in a floating situation just to get a quote, when they get a good faith estimate, this will be expiring the same day that it's written. Okay. Number 2 says how long are the charges good for? Well, we're required to hold our charges good for at least 2 weeks, or 10 business days, which effectively is 2 weeks. So things like the appraisals, credit reports, underwriting fees, all the other ancillary fees besides the rate will have to be honored for a period of at least 2 weeks, giving the buyer ample time to compare and check and things of that nature. Number 3 is how long is the rate good for? So if they're coming in for a quote, that's basically telling me is it a 30-day lock, a 45-day lock, or what have you. And then finally, this one's NA right here, but it says you must lock the interest rate. We usually say at least 10 days prior to closing. So if they do decide to float, line 4 just says they need to be locking the rate within 10 days prior to closing.